Hello everyone, and welcome to the Divorce Dad Diaries, and I'm your host, Stéphane Jutras. So this week I have a very, very special guest. As you know, I've been doing this podcast now over a year, and I try to share a lot of my stories and stories of others as well. And I also heard a lot of different stories coming from you all. And thinking about it and listening to all of you and all of us, sometimes we going through a very tough time and it's very hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I have to say that this week my guest has gone through pretty much hell and back, if you want. His name is Bruce Mclaughlin. He's a father of 4 kids who went through separation and divorce, but also went through a lot more, which, as you'll probably hear during the interview, is really an understatement. Bruce wrote a book called He Said, She Said, and then he went to jail. So basically, Bruce got arrested in the middle of the night in his own home, in front of his son, actually, and was brought up to jail. And he was actually booked on charges of abusing his children, which he was falsely accused by his wife during an emotionally charged divorce that had already permanently shattered and scarred his family. So in that book, Bruce basically shares his story, his confusion, rage, fear, and indignation as he was booked, tried, convicted, and jailed for a crime that he didn't commit. And even as an attorney, like I was saying, Bruce found himself really ill-prepared for the challenge that he was facing and trying to prove his innocence and restoring his reputation and basically rebuilding his life. So first of all, welcome to the Divorce Dad Diaries, Bruce. And I want to thank you so much to basically join me and also spend some time and be able to share your story. I have to say that, it's kind of a one-of-a-kind story. I think the listeners, people will benefit listening to it for sure. So welcome again on the show, and thanks for joining.
Stéphane, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you know what? I know when we first talked, well, first of all, I remember getting your email, and after we first talked and you told me about your story and everything else, and we had a good chat. And I mean, just a bit after, I just went and got your book because I'm like, this story is like incredible. And I went to the book, and to be honest, I mean, sometimes I have to stop and wonder, is like, did that sound like straight out of a movie? I mean, and sometimes in a horror movie. I don't know how you've been able to go through that, but it's really an amazing story, and I think it's definitely worth sharing. And I think a lot of people should definitely do as I do and go get the book, because it went through so fast, and it's actually something, I guess, that you don't think about too much, but something that can happen too. So definitely I enjoyed the book very much.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you taking the time to read it. The name of that book is He Said, She Said. Said is capitalized in the title under she, and it stands for sexual allegations and divorce, which is in parentheses. And then he went to jail. This is a mouthful for a title, but it works because it sets the stage for what happened here.
Oh, yes, for sure. And to be honest, I mean, reading the title already, but yes, definitely digging up in the book, it's really an incredible story. And thank you for mentioning the book. And we can talk a bit about it a bit later, like where to find it and everything else. But if you don't mind, just maybe telling us a little bit about yourself and before your marriage, how it started, all this started basically.
Well, my name is Bruce Mclaughlin. I am originally from the Washington, D.C. area of the United States. I'd like to express a greeting to our Canadian friends as well as our U.S. friends that are on this podcast or be listening to it. And I kind of had an idyllic childhood in the sense that I was raised by a mother and a father who were both independently successful. My father was a member of the State Department, and we traveled to Europe. I was born in Germany, then West Germany. was raised in the Frankfurt International School, north of Frankfurt, West Germany, for several years. We moved to Japan. My brother was born there. He's 6 years younger than I am. And we lived in Japan as well, raised by a father who was successful in his own right, and then by a mother who was an artist, and later in her life became a muralist and regionally renowned in the Maryland and Virginia, D.C. area. I became an attorney, of all things, and a trial attorney at that. Mm-hmm. And when this unfortunate situation occurred, when I was going through a divorce with a wife by the name of Robin, she was a native New Zealander. She prevailed upon our young children. I have 2 older boys and twin girls. Then they were 9, 7, and 2 5-year-olds. To believe, after my second son told us in court thousands of times that this happened to them and that their father would get help by virtue of indicating to the authorities ultimately that they were fondled and sodomized and raped, literally, by their father. These children having no idea what really that all meant.
Yeah.
That I then found myself in quite a pickle. And I say this with my background as a trial attorney to say that if this could happen to me, a white, privileged male with resources who is a trial attorney, then this can happen to anyone. And my purpose in writing this book, even though it's a rather ignominious subject, is to highlight the fact, Stefan, that in cases where there is a divorce and lawyers are involved, 80% of the allegations of abuse, whether they be physical or sexual abuse, are false, because there is what is little known in society as suggestibility of children. It's actually now in the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual as a disorder, a disease. Is classified also as parental alienation. And one parent typically can prevail upon children of a nubile age to say certain things if they say it long enough and hard enough and consistently enough to believe in instilled memory. That is memory that was never there, in fact, but was instilled by a power adult, such as a parent. Then these children come to believe what they've been told thousands of times, in my case, over and over again, as being true. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are, or that's where we were with my case.
Yeah. And that's pretty, I think you mentioned a couple very interesting points on that. First of all, you being in that situation, being an actual attorney, so it just shows that definitely can happen to everyone. And parental alienation too. I mean, why, when we first talked, I thought it would be an amazing interview on my show is there's 2 reasons. The first one was, I think it's a story that has to be told, and there's a lot of good things in there to kind of learn, and it's an incredible story for sure. And the second thing too is, and like I said, it's an incredible story of basically resilience, hope, and that no matter what, at the end, it's possible to go through, but at what cost? And the other part too is you talk about parental alienation, and also that's another reason why I think it is interesting and good to have you on is, and again, talk about that in the book, and you just mentioned it, is I get a lot of emails and comments about that, and not at the level maybe that you're at, obviously, but a lot of parental alienation, telling kids things that their dads did or do so that the mom can keep the kids with them. And you're right, a lot of situation, and I experienced that even firsthand with little things. After a while, they start believing it's true, and that's how it is, right?
Stefan, let me just jump in and say this about what you just said, and that is the motivation of the mother in this case, the New Zealander, was to ultimately take the children back to New Zealand and away from the situation where she did not wish to be in this divorce. As you know, there are some very weird things that happen in divorce with parents or with adults who are opposed to each other, particularly if they're going to court. In this particular case, my ex-wife's lawyer was a scoundrel. Mm-hmm. He had advertisements of himself in the paper and in the bar news, posed next to a Doberman Pinscher, advertising himself as someone who would do anything and everything for his client to win a divorce case. And you being a divorced dad, I being a divorced dad, and this doesn't just apply to dads, it applies to mothers too.
Well, of course.
We were told by this lawyer to my ex-wife, look, you want to go back to New Zealand, your native country, you want to take the children there. The only way that you're ever going to be able to separate yourself from your ex-husband is if you find that there is some evidence of physical or sexual abuse, which would cause the court to pull the children away permanently from their father. And certainly sexual abuse would be the answer if that happened. And of course, the lawyer always, in a very slick way, says, if that happens, or if that had happened, putting this very pernicious thought into the mind of a divorced to be parent. And that's exactly what happened here. This lawyer put this into the mind, I'm sure, of the mother, who then instilled this into the children. And we had this result, unfortunately. And I might say, too, I said to you earlier, Stéphane, that 80% of these types of cases in a divorce where there is allegations of abuse are false. But the flip side is that most children tell the truth. We know this inherently to be true. Where the odds are that if a child in a non-divorce situation says that they were abused by, anyone, we as adults tend to believe those children. And so what happens is that juries, judges, the public tends to believe children in a S.A.I.D case, a sexual allegation and divorce case, as if it was a non-divorce scenario where there was no installation of memory, changing the framework of the mind of the child. And that's where I found myself.
And I think you answered part of the question too, but you talk about the lawyer that your ex-wife got, and maybe not the good kind of attorney for sure. But the question I ask myself, like even reading the book, is what drove your ex-wife to go that far? I mean, it's something you want to have the kids, obviously, and you want to have the kids full time. And I think a lot of parents getting through a divorce will go through that. But I mean, this one is really kind of the next level. Maybe I'm not aware of it. Since you're an attorney, maybe you see more of that than they are. But I mean, is it something that happens often, that they go kind of that far to basic? Because I mean, those are big allegations. And
well, look, you don't have this happen as much because most people are not mentally unstable, such as my ex-wife was.
Okay.
Because if you think it through, you as a parent are basically causing your own children to be put at risk.
Exactly.
Yet someone who is not mentally stable is willing to go to that length to not necessarily put your ex-husband in jail, even probably, there's enough anger in some divorces to instill that, but to put your children in a figurative jail. They really haven't thought it through, or the parent is just mentally unstable, as was the case with my ex-wife.
Did you expect anything like that? There's a scene in the book where I remember you basically were, I think it was at night, you were sleeping, and that's where the cops came to your place. But did you have any idea that this would get to that point?
No, and it sneaks up and grabs you by the throat because it is so unbelievable. It's the principle of the big lie.
Mm-hmm.
The big lie is where there is a falsehood that is so big that it must be true. And that is the irony of these false allegations of sexual abuse. Particularly in a parent who had nothing but a positive, loving relationship, as I did with my 4 children. I raised my children during the divorce situation more competently, and actually before the divorce, more competently than the mother, who had some real depression issues caused by her pregnancies, postpartum depression. She was on Prozac and other types of anti-anxiety medication. Zoloft, I think, was one of them.
Okay.
So there's that issue as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can see definitely. I mean, mental health is definitely an issue, and just what happened to you is horrific, and it's a story you don't hear every day. But sadly, we hear stories about parents and families and people, parents doing even worse thing, like decided to kill the whole family because they don't want the mother to go with the kids, or vice versa. So I guess mental health definitely doesn't help. And
well, this was literally a murder, if you will. It was a murder by ambush. The mother literally murdered me and put me behind bars for 4 years and 2 months.
Yes.
It wasn't enough time as far as she was concerned at the time, because of the anger in which she had stirred herself to the level of justifying this kind of behavior that feeds off of itself and makes you even more aggressive, and made more aggressive because her 2 boys came to her and said, "Mom, if you get the divorce, we want to go live with Dad." Well, can you imagine what a woman would feel like if her 2 oldest children said that to her? She would want to fight and literally destroy, as she attempted to do with me, my life, so that she could be the person caring for these children.
And I think too, I mean, the other thing definitely destroyed your life, but one thing that probably she didn't think about or realize is, I mean, you destroy pretty much the life of your children too. There are kids involved in all this, and the things that the kids have to do, and it's really basically destroying your life, your children's life at the end, and it will never be the same either way. I mean, I can't even realize how this would even be a win at the end, but I guess that's another story.
Well, flash forward this case, Stefan, and you should know my 2 girls live with me right now in my residence, and they are both married, but they're both struggling in their marriage because they haven't resolved the issues in their life regarding these false allegations of abuse. In fact, just this year, both of them have come to realize that these allegations are not true. It's taken them, my boys, it was a lot faster. It's happened 10 years ago with them. But with these young ladies, it's literally taken them until the age of 29, after having talked to their brothers, after having looked at parts of my book, after having thought through their own memories, to understand that they really didn't have any actual memory of what happened as they can best recall. This was instilled in them. And in seeing their mother, who lives in Florida, they've both visited her, and they've seen how honestly weird she really is. And it's not until they've had this kind of perspective that now their whole world is turned upside down. So as where before we would blame Dad because Dad was the one who sexually abused me, to now understanding that it wasn't Dad who abused them, it was their mother who abused them. So now, instead of having the compromised relationship with their father, they have a compromised relationship with their mother, who to this day won't admit that what four children are telling her never happened, to include the fact that she never saw anything happen. She is still holding fast to the fact that she believes it happened because she can't admit it to be true. It would make her out in her own mind to be a monster. And so she's stuck literally in this very difficult place where she has not forgiven herself, and she's not allowed the children in this respect to let this go and forgive themselves as well for something they never caused. This is the real heartache that I suffer.
Yeah, and it's always one thing that I mentioned too about that. I mean, kids, I think at one point they get older and they realize what's been happening, and it will come out and they'll figure it out. I mean, kids are usually very, very smart on that part. It might take longer than others, like you said. Your daughters, I guess, took longer on that part. But that's one thing that I guess at some point, and a bit again, I have pretty much full custody of my kids, and it was the same thing too. Now they're with me. It's been a couple of years, and I think they kind of by themselves just realizing what's been happening and making their own conclusion because they're older and they're not as, I guess, influenceable as when they were maybe younger. So.
Were your children alienated from you by their mother?
Yes, they were. And again, it's never at that level, but there was at the beginning, their mother wanted to have them full time. So that's how kind of that started. And again, the way that she portrayed me and things like that. So, and stories but they realizing, and that was my way of dealing with that is, and again, like I said, it's a different situation as yours, but my way was, I'll let it go and they'll figure it out by themselves and they'll see. And that's what's been happening. They see what's happening. They see what's said and they realize, what I say, what I do, what their mother say, what their mother do. And they can make their own conclusion. And they realize that at the end that maybe there was a bunch of stuff that were not true or that they actually see and they made their own realization after time.
So did the mother invent false allegations that you were doing something wrong at all with them?
I mean, the allegation was stories, how I was acting and what I've been doing and about work or the time I was spending with them. And like I said, luckily, it never got at a point where it was like allegation that would have to be brought out to court and sexual allegation and things like that. So that's why the first question I was asking you, what brings someone to do that? So it never got to that way. But a lot of the stories and beliefs, I guess, that they realized living with me and also kind of looking at the other side, looking at from outside and being older, they realized what's true and what wasn't true. So
how old were your children at the time this happened?
It was like 10 and 12.
Yeah. See, they were fortunately older to the point where they had a better ability to think for themselves.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And the younger that you are, the more nubile you are, the harder it is for you to separate it from your parent.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I was lucky for that exactly, is at the age that they were, even if they got influence, I couldn't imagine if they would have been like 4 or 5 years old or a lot younger. It would have been probably a completely different story.
So, Stéphane, let me emphasize to your listeners that in order to avoid something like this even possibly taking place, make sure that you're not naive like I was to believe that the system will correct itself. As a lawyer, I had faith in the system of justice, and I was wrong. Sometimes we don't get just results. Oftentimes in divorce situations, we don't get what we want at all. But don't be naive to think that something like this could not happen. You have to, while you have the opportunity, talk to your children about this and say, look, we're going through a difficult time. Your mom and your dad have had our differences, but we don't have any issues with you. Mm. And if, in fact, either one of us bring up any allegation that we have been abusive to you, whether it be physically hitting you or touching you in your private areas, or having a sexual relationship with you, that is just not true. And you have to stand up and you have to understand that that's the truth, because that's a crime. And that could be a very serious problem if we said or tried to say things that were not true and they turned out to go to court, and it could result in jail for either one of us. So if any of this is an inkling that you get a sense from your child that something like this is happening, that mom is talking to me or dad is talking to me about these strange things, you need to address it with the child. Don't be afraid like I was. Mm-hmm. Stand up, be counted, talk to your children, and make sure they understand the truth.
That's a great tip. I think the communication, and I was lucky enough that we had, again, there was no allegation at that level, but just having in general an open communication with them. When they're a bit older, it's a bit easier, but definitely making them aware of that. And one thing, that was a question I wanted to ask you, if you had some tips that you wanted to share. And I think one thing, and you might maybe agree with me, is on my side, at least, it was to get, don't be naive, and also to get represented early. My thing is, I thought I could solve it myself with my ex, and we lost a lot of time, energy, fights, and a lot of things on that front. And I think getting someone to help you, like an attorney to help you, and in your case, sadly, I think, again, going through your book, maybe your first attorney that you got wasn't maybe the best you could have had.
No, he wasn't. And that's the other thing I'd advise, Stéphane. If you have a lawyer you're not really satisfied with, either because they're not aggressive enough, standing up to the other lawyer, or they're not fully apprising you of what's going on, or you pay them a lot of money, a lot more than what you feel that you should be paying them for what you're getting, or they're giving you bad advice that is causing you to have problems, get rid of them. Get yourself another lawyer. Get somebody who is willing to do those things that you need. Because I made some mistakes with lawyers that I kept on way too long, and I should have gotten rid of them a long time before I did have them terminated. One in particular, one issue came up where my lawyer encouraged me to go along with supervised visitation and agree to have a supervisor around, because the wife, Robin, had made allegations that I was hurting the children or grabbing them or whatnot, because it started with physical abuse. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. I'll have a witness there in case there's other false allegations. Well, I ultimately did have witnesses who came to court to testify with respect to the fact that they saw nothing untoward with respect to my relationship with the children. But because of the principle of the big lie, it didn't matter what other bystanders would see outside of a bedroom or, a room in your house where these children are saying some of this happened, because it's such a big lie that it's got to be true. Yeah. And that's what happened to me.
That's the thing you were mentioning also, like, it's such a big lie, and having kids involved, and it's all kind of touchy subject on that part. So definitely makes it, but being well represented, I think it's even on my side, like even going through a divorce, just a normal divorce. That's what I figured too, is being, I had an honest discussion with my lawyer at first, and she mentioned how she was working and how she would attack the case and how she would go. And like you said, I saw a couple of them, and they have different ways of dealing with divorce. And I assume the same thing if you go in like allegation and criminal cases. So it's very good to shop for them, definitely.
Yeah, it's very good to shop for them. Make sure you do Google searches. Now we have the ability with the internet to get people's comments, not just what lawyers want you to hear on their website, but go to independent sources where people have had real experiences with these attorneys. And like with anything you're shopping for, get their reviews independently and then make a concerted, intelligent decision. And by the way, if you manage to hire somebody who's highly recommended and they're not so effective, like a politician that I hired who came highly recommended but had no time for individual clients because she was always on the Hill trying to represent some issue. I fired her because I needed to have representation. I don't care about the politics of what she's doing in her main job.
And I had a question too. I guess we talk about the representation and going to court, and that's maybe one of the tough things when you go to court and your kids are there. Or I know yours maybe I think they were recorded, but let's say we'll talk in a general case. You have to have your kids to go testify in court. I guess those a bit of preparation is with the lawyer and everything else to basically prepare them to go back. Because I mean, again, if you have young kids or even a bit older kids that have to go testify, or either even go and say, you know what, you want to pick which side you want to go and for custody and things like that. Is there a way to talk, I guess, to the children or to kind of prepare so it doesn't become kind of a fiasco in court, or it's just basically just go and say the truth?
I don't know about Canadian law, but in most states here in the United States, there are certain age limits in a divorce situation where children can testify in court. In Virginia, a child typically has to be at age 14 or greater to testify on the issue of who they'd like to live with. Because you can imagine younger children are going to be pulled back and forth by parents saying, well, you've got to say this, and the other parent saying, well, no, you've got to say that. And the courts have realized long ago that this is not a tenable position to put the child in. It's not in the best interests, is the typical question you ask that a judge asks of whether a decision should be made for a child, of the child. And so therefore, a lot of times kids are kept out of it. And if there's a way where you have any semblance of a relationship with the other parent, try to agree that you're not going to drag your kids into the middle of this, and you're not going to talk to them about the divorce, and you're not going to try to influence them one way or the other as to who they should go live with, because it puts pressure on the child that is not proper. And if the court finds out that you have been putting undue pressure, trying to alienate the other parent through the child, they oftentimes will change custody just on that basis alone. And your lawyer, if he's sharp, will point that out to the court because it's something that should not happen.
Thank you. I think that's good info. So just to, I guess, once you were basically exonerated of everything and all those allegations were dropped and everything was dropped, I mean, is there a semblance of going back to normal after that? Like how did that happen with that? Because I know you did a lot of work after you got basically your license back, I guess, and you started working a bit on those cases and helping out as well, right? And changed some legislation as well. That's what I saw that on your side.
Fortunate to be acquitted on a second trial because evidence was withheld by a prosecutor and not found by my own defense lawyers, who were also committing malpractice, so said the appellate courts, that allowed me a second trial in violation of my constitutional rights. That's why the justice system in Canada and America, I believe, is good in the respect that if there is a wrong that's committed, the system can sometimes correct itself, particularly if you have a written constitution that's been violated, and your new lawyers can point out to the court, can overturn a wrong, which happened in my case. And I got that new trial. I was able then to get my bar license back as a result of an acquittal. And I was able to practice law again, divorce law, criminal law, and be passionate for various defendants who went through the same courts that had put me behind bars for 4 years and 2 months. And so I was able to pay it forward in that respect. And the good Lord gave me an opportunity to break through all the difficulties by being able, through the very system that had wronged me, to do what might be right and to help other people avoid what I went through. It's very therapeutic, and I didn't have to pay a dime for it from a psychiatrist.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. It's a big price to pay, but I agree. I guess it's probably very therapeutic at the end. Well, Bruce, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this was really, really amazing. And I want to tell everyone, if you want to know more about the story and everything, please go get Bruce's book. I mean, I got it on the Apple ebook store, Amazon, it's available everywhere. I don't know, Bruce, if you want to add anything where if someone wants to get the book or wants to get in touch with you or needs help.
Stefan?
Yes.
Let me say that people can purchase this book, as you said, on Amazon.com. And if people have problems or they know of people who have problems in a divorce situation where there's been some false allegations of abuse or any allegations of abuse, I'm happy to weigh in on helping that scenario and give advice where there may be some help needed as to, what to do in these situations, what experts to use or what expertise should you consider, what should you avoid, what is it that you should do in the way of getting a lawyer, and all of that I'm happy to weigh in on. My business cell phone is 240-344-0082. I'm happy to answer your call or call you back if you leave a message.
Perfect.
And my email address is bwmcl, Bravo Whiskey Mike Charlie Lima in military speak at Verizon.net.
That's perfect. I'll put everything on the website anyways, because usually there's the current podcast. I have a full page, so I'll put all the information where the book can be found and your website as well for the book and everything. And yeah, some of the information. So definitely if anybody needs any help on the law side and I guess to live in the US, I can contact you. So that will be available. So really, really happy to have you on. And maybe at some point we can do, another episode on exactly how you pick a good lawyer and all those tricks too. So maybe that could be.
I'd be happy to do that, Stefan. Let me say, if I can, in parting,
of course,
I appreciate your podcast, helping people who are going through difficult situations to do the very thing that you learned what maybe not to do or how you had been compromised. You're trying to give back through what you're doing here. And I commend you for it, because that's what perhaps our faith or the good Lord would have us to do. And I made it through these very, very difficult times. And the last thing I want to say, and I wanted to tell people that if you keep your faith, if you stay strong in understanding that despite it all, you are loved and you are very much of a value to your Creator, that you can make it through the most difficult, through the darkest of times.
You're the proof of it.
You need not take things into your own hands and do something dumb. You can, in fact, make it, as both you and I have seen in the real world.
Yeah, I always say it, and sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes you don't want to hear that when you're at the bottom, and I'm sure it was your case, but usually it gets better, so definitely to keep faith on that front. But thanks to you as well for sharing this and helping out as well. I think, like I said, there's a lot of people out there, and why I started my podcast, I probably said a million times before, but it's really because there wasn't a lot of information around this I found out there. And I wanted to kind of share a bit my story and people's story. And I discovered that I met a bunch of incredible people like yourself and that share their stories and hopefully make, even if you can help one or two people, that's already a win in there. So thank you again for all the work you've done for your book and what you're doing. And I'm glad that it ended up well and we can actually talk now.
That's right, Stefan. And my hat's off to you because of your podcast. Keep up the good work, and I'm happy to get back on if you want to do a second session. Thank you for inviting me into this one.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for spending time with me, and I really hope you enjoyed the last interview with Bruce. And as always, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to me at the divorcedadddiaries@gmail.com. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to Bruce or to me, please don't hesitate. You can also find this interview and all the past episodes on my website, www.thedivorcedadddiaries.com, and also on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. So please feel free to reach out, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. I know I really did. And there's a lot more to come. So please feel free to subscribe to the podcast, so that way you won't miss any episode and you'll get a notification whenever I post a new one. And also you'll keep up to date with what's happening. So I hope you have a great week and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.